じのなんかそういう器みたいな感じになってます。初音ミクらしさって僕はあんまりない。初音ミクって何だってありっていうか。
For Ito, Miku has the potential to change the way we think about music.
そういう新しいそのテクノロジーによって新しい音楽のあり方っていうものを模索していきたいと思っていました。
And for her fans.
Okay, guys, I'm placing an order to buy pound, British pound at 129.22.5. Okay, let's see if I will buy it. Position open on on British pound at 129.22.5. I opened long position.
Now, there are a lot of fitness gadgets out there. In my quest to get fit, I tested 17 of them over the last few months. At least one personal trainer I know was a little bit skeptical.
Yeah, I've been watching these new technologies come to the market for almost as long as I've been a personal trainer. They're just tricks and tropes. They're not much different than the Bowflex machines or, to be honest, the original Jane Fonda workout video.
But some of these gadgets that are just coming to the market do so much more than what they used to do just tracking your activities. Out of all of them, this chest strap was my favorite. It comes with a robot coach that points to the future, one where you might not need a human trainer at all. And it works like this. You wear the chest strap so that it can read your heart rate, and that connects to Move's free app that talks to you.
Welcome to Move.
heart rate hit outdoor running. Let's get moving and warm up in zone 2.
Move's computerized coach tells you what to do at that exact moment, whether you're running outside or you're doing body weight exercises indoors.
Swing your arms faster to get your legs moving quicker. Let's crush this round.
And by reading your heart rate, she knows exactly how hard you're working. She keeps you honest.
Way to go, you are in the target zone. Keep pushing, you're almost at the end of the round. Don't give up.
I've been running for 7 years now, and my biggest problem is that I never push myself hard enough. I end up going on the same slow, comfortable 30-minute jog, but the Move HR Burn blasted me out of that rut. By the end of these half-hour exercises, I was drenched in sweat in a way that I never am when I work out alone. Training with a real person is great, whether that's your group instructor or your coach or your personal trainer. But humans, they're expensive. For the rest of us, this $60 gadget is all you need.
What does it take to change the world? A big army? A cure to a pandemic? A revolution? All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room, an internet connection, and the world will listen. Assange is located here, and more specifically, right here. And from that location, he's posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some of the world's most powerful people. And in doing so, has been labeled a hero, a villain, a nihilist, and everything in between. This is how an Australian programmer sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London became one of the most influential and notorious people in the world. Born in 1971 in Townsville, Australia, Assange has always been on the move. Living in over 30 homes by the time he was in his mid-teens, Assange, along with his mother and half-brother, finally settled down in Melbourne. His introduction to hacking started at 16 when he was given a Commodore 64, which he attached to a modem. He attended the University of Melbourne, where he studied programming, physics, and mathematics. He never graduated, but that doesn't mean he didn't get an education. By 1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of what would come later was the hacking that he did as a young programmer, and that really sort of foreshadowed a healthy skepticism of the use and abuse of technology by governments.
That's Vernon Silver.
I'm a reporter for Bloomberg's investigations team.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. But what is WikiLeaks? It's a website that posts unfiltered, usually classified documents. What separates it from every other media outlet is that they have no editorial hierarchy. With a publication like the New York Times, information comes in, they take that information, package it, then disseminate it for the public to see. WikiLeaks, however, cuts out the middleman.
WikiLeaks gathers information, most of it given to them anonymously. So what they're doing is really very simple. They get the information in one end from who gives it to them and out the other with sometimes minimal interference. Julian Assange is the leader of that, the mastermind, the creator, and really, because he thinks of it as a journalistic enterprise, the editor-in-chief.
But every story starts with a source, and Assange has some unconventional sources.
Julian Assange does not hack as far as we know. He is the recipient of people who are either insiders who give him secret documents or hacked emails from a foreign power.
That's Eli Lake.
I am a columnist for Bloomberg.
And there was no source bigger for Assange than Chelsea Manning. He used to be known as U.S. soldier Bradley Manning. In 2010, Manning provided Assange and WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of leaked government documents. WikiLeaks quietly began releasing the documents in February of 2010, then made big headlines in April by posting what is now known as the collateral murder video.
Come on, fire!
It was a vivid, graphic video. It changed the debate on the Iraq War, and importantly, it put WikiLeaks on the map when they put it online, and they couldn't be ignored at that point.
And those leaks were just the beginning. They went on to post more than 90,000 leaked documents known as the Afghan war logs, 390,000 documents known as the Iraq war logs, and 250,000 private messages between diplomats called cables in what is now known as Cablegate. These leaks were met with very real ethical questions.
The problem with publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources for U.S. diplomats who faced real danger when their names were exposed.
Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton drove the point home that
every country, including the United States, must be able to have candid conversations about the people and nations with whom they deal.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation. He claimed the allegations were fabricated to get him extradited to the United States, a claim the U.S. government denied. Either way, Assange's next move was
to seek refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, which really was the beginning of the new chapter in his life and what we're dealing with now, which is him being stuck in London.
What was supposed to be an office in an embassy is now Assange's self-imposed prison to this very day. But that doesn't mean he's slowed down. Since being trapped in the embassy, WikiLeaks has released files about Guantanamo Bay prisoners, Syrian political figures, and the draft to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then came the 2016 U.S. election.
Thousands of leaked emails showed Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Over the course of 68 days, WikiLeaks released 20,000 confidential Democratic National Committee emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
I think we've had enough of the Clintons, in all fairness.
Once WikiLeaks started exposing secrets of the Democratic Party, Julian Assange became a hero to many on the right. Public opinion kind of flip-flopped.
WikiLeaks.
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians. They released an analysis from a private cybersecurity firm that had said it was the Russians.
But Assange claims
our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy. Maybe he'll leave, maybe he won't. Kind of regardless, his work has been done. He's changed the way people think about their governments, about their own secrets, about their own hackability, and really the world has changed because of him.
To expose everything you won't admit. And action. This entire video is based on a true story. When I do like motivational speeches or even tell myself like love yourself and you should love yourself.
This is Lily Singh, but to fans all over the world, she's the YouTube star Superwoman.
What if everyone's a girl? Superwoman. I know we can change the world for the better, one positive day at a time. My parents now know what I do. They didn't know what I did for a long time in the beginning of my career. I was just making videos in my room. They had no idea. Mom, Dad, have you seen my keys? I can't find them anywhere. Because you're always on phone. Until someone called them, like a family member from another part of Canada was like, Canada, is your daughter making videos? And the mom was like, I don't know, Lily, are you making videos?
Just making videos grew into an entire career. Today, Lily's YouTube channel has some 12 million subscribers over 2 billion views, and guest stars like Michelle Obama, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Seth Rogen.
I think a lot of young girls are raised to believe that you're going to go to school and then graduate and then get married and then get a job and have kids.
And Lily was on that path, all the way through a psychology degree at York University in Toronto. But when she started thinking about a career,
I started to immensely panic and think something was wrong with me because I tried to figure out my life and it wasn't working in that straight line.
It was 2010, and YouTube was only 5 years old.
I thought nothing of YouTube. I was probably the last person in my circle of friends to discover YouTube. And I remember when I did, I thought, this is so strange. There's people making videos in their rooms and other people are watching them.
So she figured, why not give it a shot?
I one day posted a video because I was sad and I wanted to be creative and happy.
She didn't know how to edit video or write scripts, so she winged it.
It was so bad and so cringe, and my expectation was literally nothing. I was like, I'm gonna put this video up, a couple of my friends are gonna watch it, probably make fun of me, and that's gonna be the end of this. The second and third video came from, wait, 70 people watched my first one, can I get 80 to watch the next one?
She kept creating, she kept posting, and the viewers kept coming. Lily had found an audience.
A lot of the comments were, oh my God, there's a brown girl on YouTube.
More specifically, Indian. Lily's parents immigrated to Canada from India, and Lily was born and raised in Scarborough, near Toronto.
My home life was awesome. My parents, even though I portrayed them to be quite strict in my videos.
Oh, Lily, wear the rest of your skirt, huh? I teach you like this, to walk around like this, showing everything to everyone.
They actually aren't like that at all. They're pretty modern and pretty cool.
Your dress is short. Don't know what for.
And were pretty lenient with me. I mean, I got away with a lot of things. I was a brat. I was a brat.
She had a different idea of what she wanted out of life than other kids. In a grade school graduation slideshow, her classmates said they wanted to be lawyers and doctors.
And then I came up and I was like, rapper.
Making out with your friends, man. But then you say that you hate hoes.
I could just feel my parents being like, why?
Because that's just not something women really did in the Singh family.
I know there was a ton of people that weren't happy about my birth being a female, so I think, and that's some real-ish, but it's a real thing. The best thing I could have done to prove to so many people that didn't want my mom to have a daughter was to become Superwoman.
What up, everyone? It's your girl, Superwoman.
It was the name of Lily's favorite hip-hop song by Lil Mo featuring Fabulous.
I love the song so much because it was one of the only songs at the time that was an empowering female song, where Lil Mo's going on about, like, I will save guys with my superpowers, and I will save girls with my superpowers, and I am the Superwoman. I thought, this name that I've had for so long that empowered me when I was younger, I'm gonna make this my screen name. Maybe there should be a new series.
Superwoman didn't just burst onto the scene overnight with a viral video. It was a steady climb fueled by hard work.
The moment that I thought this is going somewhere and this could be a career was the first time I performed internationally. It was in India. And it was the first time where I was truly across the world and people knew my videos.
Singh has transformed herself from a bratty kid to an internet personality to a media mogul. She starred in a feature film, A Trip to Unicorn Island, in 2016. And her book, How to Be a Boss, hit the New York Times bestseller list in 2017 while she was on a 30-city international tour. Lily started out with the goal of getting millions of subscribers and financial security.
Hurry the hell up.
But after surpassing those goals, success has new meaning.
I've really come to terms with the fact that my definition of success is what's the best legacy I can leave behind. And it's not the number of views, the number of subscribers. It is the number of people that can say, this girl changed my life or changed something in my life positively.
CTE is often found in the brains of deceased athletes, military veterans, and others with a history of repetitive brain trauma. Hundreds have donated their brains to the VA Boston University Concussion Legacy Foundation Brain Bank.
This is a former NFL player who died in his early 70s, and this is a veteran who also died in his early 70s.
Dr. Ann McKee dissects these brains.
The hippocampus and the mammillary bodies are very important for memory. I can see that they're slightly affected.
McKee recently dissected the brain of former New England Patriots player Aaron Hernandez, who was convicted of murder and later committed suicide.
You'll see right away that the brain is showing signs of shrinkage. You can see the crevices in the brain that you can't see in the normal.
McKee says Hernandez's severe case of CTE impacted his decision-making, depression, and ability to control rage and aggression. Right now, she thinks we're underestimating how many people have CTE.
We were able to distinguish between CTE and controls and CTE and Alzheimer's disease. The next question is, can we do this in the blood, and can we do this in living people? And we aren't there yet with those answers.
But the need for a diagnosis in the living is motivating companies such as Quanterix in Lexington, Massachusetts, to work faster on technology that could diagnose concussions and CTE in as few as 30 minutes. Kevin Rosovsky is the CEO.
It's like a high-powered microscope. And so by doing that, we can see little biomarkers that you couldn't see before in the blood.
Quanterix received a grant from the NFL and just went public. Since then, its stock is up more than 40%. The company sells a machine called Simoa for $175,000 to other biotechs, hospitals, and researchers.
And for the first time in history, we're able to see brain health in blood, and that's a major breakthrough, and that's leading to less invasive testing, and we've already been able to see evidence of concussions, and there's the beginning evidence of being able to see the accumulated effect of concussions.
Quanterix is also trying to detect Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, and ALS. Rosovsky says he thinks diagnosing concussions will be easier than diagnosing CTE.
Diagnosing CT in the living probably is a couple years away. We're real excited to see the progress, but reducing some of that work into actual tests in a laboratory takes time. There's regulatory approvals. There's a lot of red tape that you have to go through.
Also in this race to diagnose CTE in the blood are Athlon Medical and Exosome Sciences. And New York's Mount Sinai Hospital is scanning for the disease in the living. But it's just one step in a series of questions for those with serious head trauma. There's still no cure for CTE.
Even if we had a great idea for a treatment, there's no way to test whether it's effective or not. So that's the enormous advance that we'll get if we can develop a biomarker for this disease.
In Boston, Ann Mostu, Bloomberg News.
Wine is a $300 billion global industry where one person's opinion can make fortunes or break them. That's because of this man, Robert Parker, and his newsletter, The Wine Advocate. For 3 decades, he dominated as the world's most influential wine critic. Now Parker's protege is building an empire of his own. Antonio Galloni runs Venice.
Antonio, tell me, what are you trying to build at Venice?
Well, at Venice, we started with the idea in 2013 of building a world-class platform. We have a database of about 250,000 professionally written reviews. On Delectable, we have 7 million user reviews. Through Delectable, we also have a partnership with Whole Foods and several other partnerships that we can't announce just yet. And when you put that all together, what we have is something that no other company in our space can even come close to.
Do you think of yourself as the next Parker?
Not at all.
Why?
Because Steve Jobs said you can't live your life trying to be somebody else. So he's one of my biggest influences, and I've never wanted to be a replica of somebody else because a replica is never as good as the original. Bob is a genius, fantastic, one of a kind. We're going to be something completely different, and I have no desire to be some version of somebody else.
Different in what way?
Every decision that I've made at this company is completely anathemic to what Bob did with his company. I want our writers to be partners. All of my senior people are locked into the company. They all have equity or they have a path to equity based on business results. That's something that we never had at Parker. Our benefits are world-class, and everything that we've done at Venice is completely different from that model. When Steve Tanzer, who is the most experienced active wine critic in America, wants to work with us, that says something. When Alessandro Masnaghetti, who's the best cartographer of vineyards, wants to work with us, that says something. When Neil Martin, who's a superstar wine critic with enormous experience in Bordeaux and Burgundy and the former lead critic at The Advocate, wants to come and be part of our team, that says something.
You make it sound like The Wine Advocate was a disaster as a company and a miserable experience as an employee.
No, it was great because I got to work with Bob Parker when he was at his prime, you know, and Bob was like a second father to me, and we talked on the phone all the time, and he gave me great advice.
Can anyone's palate dominate the wine criticism business the way Parker's did? And should anyone's palate dominate it the way his did?
I just think the world is very different today. You know, it's just a totally different world. It's probably not healthy to have a single person dominating the world.
It's not even wine criticism, it's the wine industry.
Yeah, that's probably not the healthiest thing in the world. But I think that there's just such an opportunity right now with social media and technology to reach such a massive number of people that I think it's possible that 1 or 2 people will actually have more influence than Bob Parker did, because they will, again, this goes back to your first question, not trying to be a version of somebody else. You see this in sports all the time. It's like, oh, well, nobody will ever beat this record. And then somebody comes along, you know, it's like tennis, Pete Sampras. Nobody's ever going to win as many Grand Slams. Now you have 2 guys who are ahead of that and 1 knocking on the door. And so I think a lot like that.
You're a former investment banker. How does that inform and influence what you're doing and what you've done?
My generation has had to deal with a lot more challenges. That's why I think we're actually much better poised for the future. My first job in finance, the first thing that happened was long-term capital, 1998. Then the tech bubble melted down. Then there was a mutual fund trading scandal. You know, that was all like within about 5 or 6 years. And these are the things that I had to deal with as a young executive. My peers who were 20 years older didn't know how to manage in crisis. They'd only seen Black Monday. They'd just been in a big bull market. It's very different. So I'm very lucky. People of my generation or a little bit younger have actually had to deal with a lot more crises. I think that's actually good for learning how to cope with challenges in business.
From the outside, it kind of looks like you're trying to demolish the house that Parker built, right? You left the Wine Advocate.
Yeah.
You merged with one of his chief rivals.
Yeah.
And you just hired his successor, Neil Martin.
Mm-hmm.
So are you?
I think what that says is that all the best people want to work at our company. And that's really what we strive to create starting in 2013. We wanted to create a world-class company that would attract the best-in-class talent, and not just on the content side, on the technology side, on the digital side, our office, and at every level, what we're trying to, we only hire superstars, and we're looking for those superstars.
the world of professional wrestling, there's something called a swerve.
Hulk Hogan has betrayed WCW.
Some examples. These tag team partners are called baby faces, or the good guys. Then one of them swerves when he super kicks his tag team partner in the head, quickly assuming the role of the bad guy, or what the wrestling world calls the heel.
Are you kidding? What a despicable act that was!
Or a match is almost lost when, what's that? The superstar wrestler appears out of nowhere sprinting down the aisle to save the match.
That's the Warriors music! It's the Ultimate Warrior!
That's a swerve. So it should go as no surprise that World Wrestling Entertainment, known as the WWE, the most popular brand of sports entertainment in the world, is prepared for any swerves that come their way. So here's the story of how the WWE learned to see the swerve coming. So I spoke to Bloomberg reporters Felix Gillette.
I'm a writer for Bloomberg News for the global business team.
And Kim Basine.
And I'm the U.S. luxury reporter at Bloomberg.
To find out exactly how the WWE is positioning itself for an all-out global invasion, which starts with a massive change to their lucrative pay-per-view model.
WWE basically pioneered the pay-per-view model on cable. I remember as a kid, when the pay-per-view events came up, all of our friends would scramble around and try and get one of the parents to pay for it.
But in 2014, they took a huge risk.
They saw a little bit sooner than some of the other entertainment brands that where this whole thing was moving was away from cable and satellite television and towards on-demand streaming video apps. They made this risky decision, in essence, cannibalizing that pay-per-view model, which they had essentially built.
And after some early turbulence, it's working. Roughly 1.5 million people are paying $9.99 a month for the WWE app, making it the 5th most popular streaming OTT service. This adapt-or-die approach is in the WWE's DNA. Over the past 30 years, the company always seems to think 2 steps ahead. In the early 90s,
WWE was at its most threatened when Ted Turner took them on with WCW,
which stands for World Championship Wrestling. And back then, the WCW was winning the ratings war. So in order to compete with them,
WWE had changed its product from a family-friendly kind of cartoonish style to this really raw. That's why they called their show Raw. It was this raw style of wrestling.
With violent, outrageous, reality-inspired plot lines and aggressive personas.
From a 16-foot ladder!
And they won that fight against Ted Turner. And they bought WCW.
The early 2000s ushered in an era of testosterone-driven programming aimed at the red-blooded American male.
Bra and panties matches, and people smash each other over their head with like barbed wire bats and things like that.
Until 2015, when WWE fans started a hashtag #GiveDivas_a_Chance. Since then, WWE has hired 40 more female wrestlers, and that growing cast of female characters was part of a much larger plan.
They started to try to appeal to a broader set of people.
Let's attract more female fans. And after we've attracted more female fans, let's attract more international fans. They're broadening their base, and they're doing that in large part to make it more advertising friendly.
And not just friendly to advertisers.
They're trying to build up their fan base in China. They're trying to build up their fan base in Europe. They, already have a pretty good fan base in India.
India is a place where they already have an established wrestling culture.
Because of the gigantic Indian wrestler, the Great Khali. But there's still a lot of work to do. While the WWE set a revenue record in 2017, only 30% of it is coming from an overseas audience. And there's one person whose responsibility is to grow that number.
The buck eventually stops at Vince McMahon, no matter what's happening within WWE.
Yeah, he's a very controlling guy, and it's a very, very, very tightly scripted company.
And that goes all the way down the board to big stars' entrance music and their outfits and things like that.
So with a CEO like McMahon always planning 2 moves ahead and an aggressive push into multiple international markets, a big issue is money.
It's hard to do all those things simultaneously without committing a huge amount of capital to it.
And that's where the WWE becomes an attractive company for buyers.
Potentially, one thing that could happen with WWE is they could benefit by being acquired by a bigger technology or telecom company, an Amazon or Facebook or a 21st Century Fox.
So with a market cap of $2.8 billion, the advantage of owning 100% of their own content, and a rapid consolidation spreading throughout the entertainment industry, it looks like the WWE is well positioned, even if there are swerves ahead.
Thank you very much for coming here.
Thanks for having me.
I've always been relieved ever since you were appointed, because at least until your appointment, I seem to have the most unpronounceable name. But now we will keep it as Dara and John. This conference is called The Year Ahead, but in your case, you are close to 6 months into the job. And I wondered what you saw in terms of the year ahead at Uber as your biggest challenge. What's the thing that you think about most when it comes to 2018?
We definitely have our share of challenges at Uber. And for me, where I want to get Uber to the year ahead is a year of normalcy. 2017 was, I think, will go down as one of the most difficult years for any company out there. And I have to give credit to the Uber team and the employees there. It is a group of true believers who believe in our mission, who believe in mobility as a service being available to consumers everywhere at a reasonable cost. And what my job in 2018 is to get rid of the distractions and get the company back to business, get the company back to normalcy. There's a lot that we've done in the past 6 months as far as bringing in new investors, driving a new culture and norms where doing the right thing, period, comes first, bringing a new management team, et cetera. There's a lot that we've gotten done, but this is a company that knows how to execute. This is a service. Mobility as a service is something that's universal, that's needed in the world, and I just want to get back to doing business.
It's quite interesting. You said true believers.
Yep.
Normally, true believers are the last possible people where you're able to change a culture. Can you explain a bit about that?
Well, I think that they understand that mobility as a service, bringing the cost of transportation down, making transportation services available to anyone and everyone on a local basis, and partnering with cities to be a solution to traffic, to pollution, et cetera. That is a mission that they all believe in. And I think that they, having seen what happened in 2017, to some extent the crisis, the enormous crisis that the company has gone through, is a benefit because everybody at the company knows now that we need to change, that we need to break with the past as far as the way the company was run. We need to go from growth at any cost to responsible growth and growth in partnership with other players out there. That's clear, but now I've got to kind of get the company down to the normalcy of execution, of building great technology, and I think we're going to get there. It's still some tough sledding early on, but I absolutely think we're going to get there.
When you talk about execution, is profits one of the things you want to get? I think you lost $4 billion last year.
Well, profits,
peanuts by the standards of
profits would help. So at some point, we absolutely have to become profitable, and that's part of the plan.
Do you have a kind of goal for that? Do you think you should be profitable by 2022 or by 2020?
I think that we'll be profitable before 2022. This is the business itself.
Do you want to come back a bit closer, 2020?
Yeah, listen, it's not going to, I don't want to name a specific year, but this is a business that the core business, the ride-sharing business, can be profitable within 3 years. We will continue to make very aggressive investments in building out autonomy because we think that's a terrific opportunity for building out new technologies such as Uber Elevate, where near-term profitability is not a goal, but long-term growth is. So we will look to balance near-term profitability, but as a company, we will always be a company that makes big, bold bets and takes big risks.
To what extent, though, do you think that drive to become profitable fights against a little bit of this culture change? If you want to make, you talked about making money, but not at all costs. Do those two things?
Well, I don't think that profitability and culture are their issue. It's the company in the past was willing to make trade-offs as it related to how it did business, and I think was guilty of hubris, was guilty of thinking that they knew better than others, and I think that what we know now clearly is that breakneck growth can hide cultural issues, that there are no excuses for not doing the right thing, and that you do have to make trade-offs. And as a management team, we're specifically talking about those trade-offs that you have to make. We have to be a little more patient sometimes because working with governments, regulators, et cetera, sometimes takes longer, but in the end, you build a more lasting business. And so maybe what we went through was necessary, but we're here. We can control our actions from this moment onwards, and I think everyone at Uber from this moment onwards wants to build a great company, not only in terms of growth, but in terms of the kind of company anyone would want to work at.
Can I ask you one thing which you have got a sort of hangover from last year, which is all the regulatory problems, and particularly all the cases against you? I think there are 6 criminal probes or whatever going on.
The lawyers are lining up outside the door.
Which one do you sort of think? Which one do you fear most? I suppose out of these different things.
Listen, I think that all of them are serious issues, and my response is that we're going to be transparent and we're going to take responsibility for our actions in the past. I do think that there are certain circumstances where there was smoke but no fire. And I think as a company, we have to defend ourselves and work within kind of the appropriate frameworks. And my goal is just to get beyond this stuff.
But some of these things like pricing policies, surely they go right to the heart of what Uber is, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I think they do, but I think that there's a way of being smart but transparent at the same time, and that's where we've got to take the company.
Take me through governments. When you talk to governments privately, do they talk any differently than they do publicly?
Governments?
Yes, governments.
I think that they are honestly a bit relieved with how we are engaging with them, because I think that the engagement is now real. I think they feel like we're out there, we're genuine because we've learned our lessons of the past, and I do think that we can take, for example, the data that we have in terms of traffic and in terms of movement of our drivers and riders, and we can use that data to partner up with cities in order to solve congestion issues, because congestion doesn't help anyone. It wastes enormous amounts of time for consumers. It hurts the environment. And I think that we are aligned with cities, for example, to partner with them in a fundamental way to solve these problems. And I do think that when these are conversations that a number of regulators and cities have wanted to have with us for many years, and I think we are really engaging with them at a depth that I think is going to create a real win-win going forward.
Do you think you were too confrontational on this before?
Yeah, I do. I think that the company was pushing growth. And listen, any innovator, to some extent, the innovation is about questioning past kind of present practices. It's about breaking things, the Facebook breaking things. We just went a step and a half too far. And what I want to keep, hopefully, is the best of both worlds, which is this spirit of innovation, the spirit of can-do, et cetera, but the responsibility of partnership. We don't know better than you. We're actually going to work with you, of actually having dialogue and respect for our city partners, for regulators, and then continuing to take risks and continuing to do daring things. And I think we can accomplish that.
Imagine this audience here is a collection of mayors or a collection of city officials, and you want to depict, this is the Year Ahead conference, depict what the years ahead in this thing are going to be like. How far is driverless cars going to go? You talked just a few days ago about the idea of there being flying cars in 10 years' time. Can you just give a description of what you think transport is going to look like?
Well, I think that we think there are three keys to transport and where the industry is going: autonomous, electric, and shared. And I think all three are necessary in order to get to the next level of city planning, et cetera. There are many cities where up to a fifth of the space taken in these cities is taken by parking and storing these cars. And so I do think that you need autonomous, you need electric, and you need shared. And I do think it's going to take some time. True autonomy for every single use case is some ways away. What we bring to bear is our developing autonomy, and we will have autonomous cars on the road, I believe, within the next 18 months, not as a kind of a test case, but as a real case out there. And over a period of time, we're going to bring autonomous transportation and feather it in with the non-autonomous transportation with drivers.
What does feathering in mean?
Feathering in means
to a layman like
feathering
me?
Crashing. Yeah, feathering in means if you're, for example, in Phoenix, and you make a request to go from A to B, which is what you do with Uber, there will be 95% of cases where we may not have everything mapped perfectly, or the weather may not be the right weather, or there may be an accident on the road, or you may not have 2 or 3 ways of getting from A to B, where you may say, you know what, that's not an autonomous use case. We're going to send a driver to pick that person up. For 5% of cases, everything is going to fall into place. And we will send an autonomous car. The user will be able to pick, do you want, there's an autonomous car, yes or no? And we'll be able to service that A for B. That 5% is going to go to 10 and 15 and 20 as our computers and our algorithms learn more and more about what it takes to drive in a city in a real life situation. And every minute of every day, that driver, that computer is going to get better and know Phoenix better and better and better. And in 5 years, we'll have the perfect driver in Phoenix. We will have to retrain that driver in every single city. We're going to have to build out 3D maps of these cities. And it will take time, but over a period of time, you essentially have a driver who becomes the perfect driver. It'll take 10 to 15 years, but that's the feathering in that I'm talking about.
Will a child born today, will they ever need to learn how to drive?
A child born today? No, I don't think so.
So within sort of 20 years from now, we will...
I don't think so. Listen, I hear some groans.
And also,
I heard a couple of groans. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. That doesn't count an estimated 20 to 50 million people that are injured. Okay, this is actually a public safety issue. If you look at cars, 96% of cars, 96% of time, cars are sitting there not being used. It is a huge amount of pollution that's caused by these cars being in the road, and a huge amount of wasted time. So the safety is there. Electrification is absolutely key, and sharing these platforms is going to allow us to be much safer and also put our assets where they add value.
But it's quite interesting because when you first came in, I remember you sounding somewhat more skeptical about self-driving cars. You've been converted. Is that a?
The choir has spoken, and I'm listening. It's pretty exciting technology out there. But again, it will be a hybrid technology for some period of time.
What about flying cars? That came as a slight surprise.
Yes, that's a great project that we're working on. It's called Uber Elevate. And it is actually about battery technology.
It would have helped a lot of people here.
I know. I wish that I was available. We'll launch it here if we can. But battery technology is allowing us to have multiple rotors on planes, or helicopters, if you want to call them that. These rotors that are much smaller will be much quieter than helicopters are. Much quieter, much safer. If you add sharing into the equation, you can actually get the economics of going from A to B. We think within 5 to 7 years to a place where normal people would think about taking these flying cars. That'll be the beginning, and then it's about scaling. And we're working with a number of partners right now.
Do you think the regulation on flying cars, I've heard some proponents of it argue that it might be easier than it has been on driverless cars, because driverless cars, you have to deal with existing roads, existing everything. Flying cars, essentially, you're going into unconquered space.
I think that mayors that are forward-thinking understand that traffic and pollution are a real issue, and I think flying cars can be a significant solution to traffic issues in cities. And these cars, to start with, they're going to be very specific. They'll be kind of highways in the air. There'll be very specific routes that these flying cars go on. They're not going to be able to take you to your backyard and land in your backyard. There'll be these skyports. So there'll be very specific routes that you go on. And I think if you build a regulatory framework that has that kind of structure around it, I think you get to a better solve.
Can I drag you back, somewhat reluctantly, back to the real world? But you have Rajiv Misra, who came in with you from SoftBank.
Yes.
He's going to become a director. Last week, he said that Uber should focus on repairing its market share in the US and on key European markets, rather than going going to new ones. Do you agree with that? Is that the way you look at Uber?
I think one of the fundamental strengths of Uber is the global scope that we have. This is
You
a
had that
brand.
motto, everywhere. What's it? Everywhere for everyone.
Yeah, everywhere for
Do you want to
everyone.
make it some places for some people?
No, we like the everywhere for everyone. It's much sexier than some places for some people. I mean, that's
telling me.
just not interesting. I do think seriously though the global scope that our company brings is important. Our being able to build technology that we can amortize essentially everywhere in the world is hard, but it is part of the fundamental value that we introduce. So I would look at Uber very much as a global brand. That said, we're going to look at all opportunities, but at this point we are leaning forward, and 2018 for us is going to be very much a lean forward year for the company.
But without, I'm not trying to create new boardroom tension at Uber, but that would appear that SoftBank is keener on a more limited idea, whilst you're keener on everywhere for everyone.
Well, listen, SoftBank is a very important shareholder. They're our largest shareholder, and many of our shareholders have opinions over what's the right thing to do. Ultimately, the governance of the company is going to be at the board, and we'll have those discussions at the board, and we'll set our long-term strategy, and then execute on it.
One of the things which Uber played, perhaps not very fortunately, a role in was the whole sexual harassment questions and everything to do with that. I suppose one very obvious question: do you think that you have solved that part of the culture? But secondly, do you think that this is a real revolution and it's going to stick?
I think that what was happening at Uber was serious, and I think that while what Uber went through was difficult, I think the Susan Fowler blog was probably one of the best things that happened for Uber, and it certainly started a movement that's an incredibly important movement of the company. I'd be reticent to say that it's solved.
Yeah.
But it's not an endemic issue within the culture of the company, and I think the company has learned, and I think the company took very harsh and appropriate steps to make sure that kind of behavior is absolutely clear, that kind of behavior is not accepted in any way, shape, or form of the company, regardless of where you are, regardless of if you're a great performer or not. So I think we're at the right place for Uber as a company, but I think in general, we're not where we need to be in terms of women in senior positions, making sure that we're welcoming of women in technology, and we help women really build their careers within our company. There's a great kind of bottoms-up energy there, but we're not where we need to be, and we have a lot of work ahead of us.
On the issue of, you talked about the top performers, is that looking back, and also I suppose looking forward for many of the people in this room, because there are a lot of people's businesses which have been affected by this. If you had to give lessons to other people who are now looking at this issue, perhaps more seriously than they have done before, is the really bad issue, and I suppose I'm thinking some ways about the media industry in this, is that giving top performers more room for maneuver or whatever than people, or more discretion than people thought? Is that top performers need to be treated the same as everybody else?
I think they absolutely need to be held accountable. One of the really valuable lessons that I got early in my life was actually through Jack Welch, and he said, it's very tempting to allow top performers to misbehave in any way, but for me, he was talking about being aligned with the CEO. Sometimes you allow top performers. The tendency is, well, let them get away with some kind of behavior that is not the right behavior because they're so good. And what Jack told me very early on is that it's the top performers who are problematic culturally that are the most dangerous, because they have followership within the company, because people look up to them. So he's like the dumb person who is bad culturally. He's not the problem, because everyone says, well, that's a dumb person, so who cares? It's the smart person who has followership. So it is incredibly important for the top performers to actually be held to account more radically than anyone else, because they're the ones who have followership at the company, and they have to set the example. So for me personally, that has absolutely guided how I've managed. Expedia was a company that had, excellent cultural values, and one of the first things we did at Uber was to go out and reset our cultural values, and we call them norms because to me, it's not just these values that you put on the wall and kind of people stare at and you know, it's all nice. It's about behavior. And we set out to change behavior at Uber, and I think that the company was thirsting for it, and we are starting on a path, and I believe it's going to be a positive path.
An inevitable question, I hope you won't regard it as a cheap shot, but you talked about smart people who have followers throughout a company. I mean, Travis would seem to be the epitome of that sort of figure. Is that, do you think of him as being in that category of people that Jack Welch was talking about?
I think, listen, Travis was the CEO of the company, and he had incredible followership, and he was held to account, right? I mean, he's no longer the CEO of the company, and he's a board member. He's a big investor, and so he's absolutely going to play a part on the board. But we've also been very clear as a company that we do have to make a break with the past, with how we behaved as a company. And to some extent, with the new CEO being a very different kind of a CEO. So in the end, you have to be held accountable, and I think that Travis was held accountable, and at this point, he's a board member and a constructive one at that.
If you look around the world now, where do you see the next competitors to Uber? You've obviously got Lyft breathing down your neck.
Yes, yes.
Where else do they come from?
Well, I think that as you move into a world of autonomy, the position of the car manufacturers, the position of, for example, Google, who's developing Waymo and Waymo autonomous technology, you're going to get a lot of players interested in the space. And a lot of people think about Uber and ride sharing as a significant enterprise, and it is. But the fact is that we account for less than 1% of miles driven on the road now. When autonomy comes in, that number over the next 10 years is going to be closer, I believe, to 15 to 20%. So, because we're not yet a true alternative to car ownership, and I believe that as you bring autonomous and you bring the price of mobility down and make it available to everybody, everywhere, then we become a real alternative to car ownership, and that really opens up the market for us, but it also opens us up to many more competitors.
And is Google at the forefront of those competitors at the moment?
Google is one of many. I think that they've developed very strong autonomous technology, but what we think, which is exceptional, is having autonomous technology and the network under one roof, which allows us to use autonomous in a very practical way, nearer than you think.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser on Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed. Live from New York and New Jersey. We're working from home, streaming on YouTube as well. It is Friday, October 16, 2020. Carol Masser along with Paul Sweeney. It's TGIRF because it's kind of a rainy Friday in the New York metro area. Paul, I don't know what it's like by you, but it's definitely been kind of stormy here.
Yeah, absolutely. After 2 perfect days of nice fall weather, we're paying for it a little bit here. So, but anyway, it's a good day in the markets, Carol. We've got green on the screen after a couple of shaky days.
Yeah, absolutely. We're off our highs, and there's lots of stimulus talk, so that's probably helping. It's like everybody just woke up again and remembered there's an election just 17 days away, and they're like, yeah, stimulus might be a good idea here. So still not sure about the outlook, but we've got a great roundup of leaders in telecom, retail, fast food, and luxury to give us a window into what's going on. So settle in, everybody, because we've got a great 4 hours coming your way. In the meantime, let's get a check on that trading day. Hey, Charlie Pellet.
Well, hello there. Bright and sunny on Wall Street today, at least for the bulls, with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all moving higher. S&P rebounding from a 3-day slide. We are on track for a winning week, 3rd in a row if it happens. options. Stocks higher after measures of retail sales and consumer sentiment rose. Traders, though, bracing for heightened volatility amid the expiration of equity options. Here's where we stand. S&P up 18, now up 0.5. NASDAQ up 40. That is a gain of 0.3%. And the Dow up 243, up by about 0.9%. 10-year yield 0.73%. Gold is down 0.4%, 19.01 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude now down 0.2%, 40.88 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Yes, indeed. Charlie, thank you so much. And all right, everybody, U.S. posting a record $3.1 trillion budget deficit for the fiscal year 2020. That headline just crossing the Bloomberg. We knew it was going to be big.
That sounds big to me.
I'm glad it's not mine, but it is mine. All of us Americans. It's all part of our, certainly our debt here in the country. All right, let's set the Business Week agenda. Vince Signorella is with us, global macro strategist at Bloomberg News. He contributes to the Macro Squawk Desk. Squawk is a real-time curated news that's audio streamed directly through your terminal, so find it at Squawk Go on your launchpad. Dave Wilson with us, stocks editor at Bloomberg News, on the remote access from New Jersey. All right, Mr. Signorella, what's interesting to you on this Friday? Beyond getting to 5 o'clock quitting time. 6 o'clock for us, but 5 o'clock for you.
I know. Actually, if you hadn't said the record trade deficit thing, I was going to put my pinky up to my mouth and review it for the listeners. But a lot of things are interesting. Retail sales number, a blowout at a time when personal income is falling. Obviously, this is coming from savings. We've actually seen an uptick in income for lower third of income earners and a downtick in the top third of income earners. We're not suggesting we're going to get income inequality anytime soon, but you can see where the spending is coming from. It generally does drive from the paycheck to paycheck crowd. Also interesting with that is I've been wondering today, and we'll do doing a blog post later on, if that is actually going to make the sell to the Senate more difficult in trying to get a stimulus package through, because there are a number of senators who think no stimulus is needed. McConnell is stuck on the $500 billion, and you get blowout numbers in U.S. data today, including a pickup in consumer sentiment, as Charlie mentioned, and it makes for a harder argument to sell to the Senate to say we need more stimulus. And you know, there's obviously still differences between the White House and the Democrats, but this could be one of those times where, you know, good news means bad news again. So we'll have to see how that plays out. That's kind of what traders are talking about.
And I'll just say with stimulus, I mean, as Paul and I talked about a lot yesterday, I mean, tell it to the millions of people who have fallen into poverty.
Yeah.
You know, they could use certainly a little leg up here.
And if I could just make one point on that real quick, is that most of the people you talk to and most of the analysts and all the people who are writing and saying that we don't need any more stimulus and the economy is doing well are all the people who are working. They're not the people who are out of work. So ask them and you'll get a different answer.
Yeah, exactly. Dave Wilson, we have some green on the screen today after a few days of losses here. What's kind of interesting to you?
Well, it's a fairly broad-based advance. You know, that's what counts. You know, it's interesting, though, to hear Vince talk about, you know, the retail sales in the context of the stimulus package, because, you know, before when that's come up, it's been about the stock market. And sure enough, you know, even with the S&P 500 falling for the last 3 days before rising today, I mean, you're talking about an index that is pretty close to its record from the beginning of September, right around 3,500 at the moment. Peak just above 3,580. So that's another piece of the puzzle in terms of, you know, how much, you know, sort of momentum there may be, you know, either from the Republicans or the Democrats to get a deal done at this point. Beyond that, I mean, what jumps out, you know, you've got Boeing up 2.6%, you know, the European Union's top aviation regulator talking about the possibility of the plane getting back into the air, the 737 MAX jet, more specifically. You got Pfizer up 3.3%, the story there. You know, their CEO, Albert Bourla, writing an open letter saying that, you know, by next month, there may be an application for emergency use authorization of the COVID-19 vaccine they're developing with Germany's BioNTech.
Right.
And on the other side of the coin, you look at a company like Schlumberger, down 8.4%. Energy is the one group out of the 11 main ones in the S&P 500 that's lower, and a big piece of that, Schlumberger's results not going over so well.
So, all right, Vince Signorella, you and I are sitting at a bar, Paul too, Dave too. I don't know what your drink of choice is. I might be or having a nice martini. What is it that we need to focus on the next couple of weeks, especially as we kind of count down here to the election?
Well, next week, I think in particular, we want to keep an eye on NASDAQ. Republican Senator Hawley said he's going to take a bill to the floor or try to pass a bill next week to rein in big tech. Now, what that means, obviously some calling for a breakup, all kind, you can go anywhere with this. But the Section 230 for tech protection is what's been coming up this week. If they take that away, not sure where that leaves the big tech companies, but there are certainly people on both sides of the aisle who have the bit between the teeth to break up the big FANG companies, and I think that will have a lot of impact on the markets next week, depending on how those conversations go.
All right, Dave Wilson, 20 seconds, quick tease of your chart.
Oh, the chart. Kind of hard to.
What was that? This is a gift, Dave Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're looking for dividend income these days, let's just say it's kind of hard to find.
Oh, ooh, that's a good tease. All right, Dave, we know we'll see you a little bit later on. Vince Signorella, thank you as always. Have a great weekend. Global macro strategist, Bloomberg News. He's a must-read, certainly on the Squawk Desk, so check it out at the Bloomberg. All right, Paul Sweeney, let's talk about this show because we've got what is, I think, still the most read in the past 8 hours on the Bloomberg. Has to do with the president and how he has begun openly acknowledging his precarious re-election chances and is undercutting his own campaign's attempts to kind of tailor appeals to women and seniors as polls show them increasingly flocking toward Joe Biden.
Yeah, and I don't think his performance last night at that town hall helped him any. That's all I can say. That's my takeaway. I'm sure Kevin Cirilli's got much more better analysis, but I just don't think it helped him.
Yeah, the dueling debates, man. We're going to talk about all of that later on. Speaking of the election, Bishop Wayne T. Jackson, he's back. He's founder and CEO of the Impact Network. They have tens of millions of viewers. Yeah. He is working on big time on getting out the black vote, so we'll talk to him about that. We're going to talk about leadership, too, something we do a lot here. We've got the former and longtime CEO of Dunkin' Donuts with lessons learned. It's in the family. His dad created the company. He, at a young age, ran it. I love these kinds of stories.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's what a brand has become from that small donut shop to a global brand, now known as Dunkin'.
I know, exactly, right? It really changed. And when it comes to leaders in the analyst community, man, we've got a great one, courtesy of you, someone you've known for a long time.
Yeah, Craig Moffett, founder and senior analyst at Moffett-Nathanson. He's really, I would argue, the top analyst for all things telecom, cable, all that kind of stuff. He just knows it all. He's been in and out in the industry. We're going to have a chat with him, about Apple, about big tech and telecom.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's certainly a name that's very well known to our audience. All right, it's time for the Bloomberg Business Week Bite of the Day. One number that tells us a lot. Today's number, nice and round, 37,000. According to the Wall Street Journal, more Americans are renouncing their citizenship. In the past decade, nearly 37,000 have expatriated. In the first 2 quarters of this year, more than 5,300 people turned in their passports or green cards, nearly matching the total in all of 2016. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
All right. There's got to be more of a story there, and we've got to get to that. All right, let's get to World and National News headlines. For that, it's over to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden outdrew President Trump in the TV broadcast and cable ratings for their competing town hall events last night. Biden drew 13.9 million viewers. President Trump had 13 million. Pollster and political strategist Frank Luntz tells Bloomberg he does not believe either event changed the minds of those still undecided.
They agree with what the administration has done, but they don't like Donald Trump. They don't like the way that he relates to people. They like Joe Biden very much. They feel that he empathizes and cares about them, but they are scared, still scared, about his economic policy.
Luntz says he believes it's Biden's race to lose at this point. Well, we're getting a little insight into how Joe Biden would fill his cabinet if he does win the White House.
Biden plans to tap officials from inside the Washington Beltway with years of government service experience. Sources tell Bloomberg his top candidates for Secretary of State include longtime aide Antony Blinken and Susan Rice, the Obama-era National Security Advisor. Former Undersecretary of Defense Michelle Flournoy is on the short list for Defense Secretary, as is former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson. Analysts say Biden's lower-key approach reflects the challenges of the times. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Well, some encouraging news from a Defense Department study that shows coronavirus exposure risk on airplanes is very low if every passenger wears a mask. Paul Hartshorn is with the Association of Professional Flight Attendants.
I think the minute people feel comfortable getting back on aircraft is what everyone's looking for.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, this is probably, thank you very much, Nancy, a sign of more things to come. The real estate space, you know I love talking about it, Paul, and we've had a lot of stories on the Bloomberg. I'm getting ready to actually host a panel for Milken coming up on Monday that's all about real estate with a bunch of people from kind of all over the globe. This story caught our attention, though, by Natalie Wong of Bloomberg, a Japanese advertising firm apparently considering unloading what was supposed to be a new office in Manhattan. And we're talking about the Dentsu Group exploring plans to sublease space in Chelsea, where Tishman Speyer is renovating a former U.S. Postal Service facility that was set to be the advertising firm's main U.S. office, according to those in the know. That's a pretty big deal, it sounds like.
It is, and I know the Dentsu Group. They're a big advertising, one of the largest advertising agencies in the world, and based in Japan. And they, of course, have presence in New York, Madison Avenue, as you would expect. And they're looking to consolidate a lot of their offices around the city in this cool new building down in the Chelsea neighborhood. And so the issue is, like we've been talking about, Carol, I think with people working remotely from home fairly successfully, I think we're going to see a lot of companies rethink their need for corporate office space, particularly in some of the high rent areas like in New York City. And, I suspect that this is going to be, kind of the early innings of what's going to be a fairly tough game for the commercial real estate folks here in the Metro New York area.
Well, I think about our conversation with Ket Swig earlier in the week. Certainly a big presence in terms of residential commercial real estate, especially in New York City. And he talked about Facebook, right? And they're leasing lots of space right now, and they're going to have thousands of workers. But I agree with you. I think companies, first of all, real estate in a city like Manhattan, it's expensive. It's a big, line on the balance sheet. And so if there's different ways that they can maybe work around that and reduce some of their costs, I bet they can, especially as you say, a lot of people who can work from home have actually been doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I'm probably on the side of the folks who say New York will definitely come back from this, but boy, you can certainly make the argument the next couple of years could be tough.
All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing on track for a winning week. If we do have an up week, that will be the longest weekly advance since late August. S&P rebounding from a 3-day slide, up by 20 points now, up 0.6%. Measures of retail sales and consumer sentiment helping lift stocks today, with the Dow up 268 points, up 0.9%. NASDAQ up 39, that is a gain of 0.3%. Boeing among the leading stocks in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, as Europe's regulator said the 737 MAX may return to the region's skies by year-end. Boeing up now by 2.75%. 10-year down 1/32, 10-year yield 0.73%. Gold is down 0.3%, 1902 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude lower, little change, down 0.1%, 40.92 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Well, I got to say, this surprised me, and I actually should go back and check out the most read because, you know, Paul, I always like to check where our daily virus updates on the Bloomberg sit among our most read stories on the Bloomberg. I had to actually go to the second page to find it, right?
It used to be the top of page 1.
Exactly, which I thought was kind of interesting considering our environment. Yeah, maybe that's it, right?
It's fatigue, you know.
And we've got a bunch of headlines out. We've got worldwide cases, I think, surpassing 39 million. The U.S. reporting the most daily infections in 2 months. Total cases nearing 8 million. So some of the headlines definitely jarring. Let's bring in Dr. Ian Lustbader. We go to him every week for an update, for some clarity and perspective on the virus. He's clinical associate professor of medicine at NYU Langone Medical Center, and he joins us on the phone in New York. Dr. Lustbader, good to have you back with us. How are you doing this week?
Okay, thank you, Carol and Paul. Hope you guys are doing well, and definitely a very busy news week, and certainly on the COVID front as well.
Well, tell us what you're seeing in terms of the virus. I'm curious. I was actually at a doctor's office today, and I'm like, are you guys seeing an uptick? And they're like, nope, we're not yet, but we know that there's pockets around New York City. What are you seeing in your, certainly when you're at the hospital or in your private practice?
So certainly in private practice, we are seeing a lot of the post-COVID syndrome and a lot of the long haulers. We're not really seeing a big surge in cases, although a lot of those are really more in the Midwest. I mean, we certainly know nationally our cases are up over 50,000 a day of positive tests. Now, obviously, not everyone is ill and not everyone does poorly, but certainly the number of cases increasing. And in the New York City area, we certainly have a few pockets where there is kind of a surge in cases. We're not seeing a lot of that in the office yet, at least with my colleagues. And the hospitals, too, seem to have, not zero cases, but certainly not the surge that we saw previously. So will it come? Hard to know. We're certainly in Europe and around the world, we're seeing really that second or third wave hit. So that is the challenge.
So, Doctor, at NYU Langone Medical Center, a huge medical center, one of the finest, obviously, in New York City, how have you and the hospital staff there kind of starting to prepare yourself for what might be a second wave? That first wave that we all experienced back in March and April was so jarring for the medical facilities. What changes have been made?
Well, it's definitely a challenge because we're now beginning to really see over the last month or so all of those patients that were afraid to come in. So elective surgery and colonoscopies and stress tests and, all of that general medical care has really surged to pre-COVID levels, which is good news. People are getting taken care of. Everyone for certainly, whether it's surgery or some cases, they get swabbed to make sure all the patients are in a COVID-free zone. But there's certainly awareness among hospital leadership that a similar strategy may have to be implemented where the hospital has more beds and more areas available if those COVID patients come back. And certainly in terms of treatment, it's a very dynamic area. There were just some studies that really questioned how effective remdesivir is. There was a WHO study, and so that is part of the standard cocktail. President Trump got that. Certainly alone, that may not be that effective. So it's really a dynamic landscape where we're trying a number of things, and things are not completely proven. But, there's good news as well. Pfizer coming to the end of their phase 3 study and may be able to get vaccine approval. We're not hearing a lot of complications from the vaccines. Now, again, they don't publicize all of that. Eventually, that will all have to go through the FDA. But we're not hearing a lot of problems. So I'm encouraged by the vaccine, although it certainly is going to be months away before everyone starts getting it.
Right, especially when you think about the ramp up, right? Like we've had some stories on the Bloomberg just now. States are figuring out, like there isn't one version where the federal government says, "Hey guys, here's how we're going to roll out the vaccine." It's states are kind of scrambling to figure out how to do it.
Right. Well, first, they have to be approved, and FDA, approved, and the data reviewed, and there's some concern: are they really rushing it? And this is a record time. Because it's not even a year. It's amazing. February, March is when the first cases came out, and we're now in, October. So it is really quite amazing to have developed it, and with unique technology, that messenger RNA, Moderna, Pfizer. There are a variety of techniques, and all of them are really much faster than the traditional methods. And it's amazing to be in these phase 3 studies, which is really sort of the before approval and release. And I think it's encouraging if you have 30, 40,000 patients. Granted, it's not millions or hundreds of millions, but if we're not really seeing significant side effects, I think that's encouraging.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Sit tight for a second, Ian. We're going to do a little bit of news, and then, as you know the drill, we're going to come back and continue the conversation. Because I am curious. I know you talked about Europe earlier, and I do wonder, does Europe and the rising numbers necessarily mean that that's what we're going to see in the U.S., whether that's an indication of what's to come? So we're going to continue with Dr. Ian Lustbader, Clinical Associate Professor of Medicine at NYU Langone Medical Center, on the phone from New York. Paul, he's been such a great go-to, and so many times he would bring up something, and then it's in the headlines like the next day or the following week. Yeah. So he's really been someone who has been on the front lines, dealing with patients, seeing it firsthand, and he's just been a great voice for us.
Yeah, it's great, Bloomberg Radio here, that we've had so many good sources really trying to get us up to speed on really this virus. And so we've had people from Johns Hopkins as well, so very fortunate.
All right, we're going to continue our conversation. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Paul Sweeney on a day when we do see stocks actually higher, and we're on track for some gains this week. Stick around. We're coming back in just a moment right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Massar along with Paul Sweeney on a TGIF. Man, I'm exhausted. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to wrap.
There's no easy weeks, it seems like.
There are no easy weeks, and that's really the case when it comes to COVID-19. We're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Ian Lustbader over at NYU Langone Medical Center. But first up, back to your top business stories and another check on that trading day. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there. Happy Friday to you both. Once again, green on the screen right now with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing. S&P rebounding from a three-day slide, heading for its longest weekly advance since late August. Stocks climbed after gauges of retail sales and consumer sentiment topped estimates. S&P up now by 21, up 0.6%. The Dow up 265, up 0.9%. NASDAQ is up 45 points, a gain there of 0.4%. 10-year down 230 seconds, 10-year yield 0.73%. Gold down $6 the ounce. That's a drop of 0.3%, now at 19.02. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.3%, $40.83 a barrel. Red ink is flooding the American economy. The federal government posted the largest budget deficit on record, $3.1 trillion in the fiscal year that ended in September. Pfizer says it could seek emergency use authorization for its COVID-19 vaccine in the U.S. by late November if the shot is shown to be effective in a large, late-stage trial. Pfizer shares up now by 3.4%. CVS Health and Walgreens Boots Alliance will give COVID-19 vaccines to residents and employees of long-term care facilities. Those shots will be free to the facilities. In the meantime, Dr. Andrew Pekosh, a professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, says masks do remain one of the best defenses.
It's quite clear that we know how to reduce cases. Mask wearing is one of the critical things. Social distancing is a second thing that goes hand in hand with the mask wearing. It seems to be more of a politicized issue these days, and that's turning back in terms of reduced compliance for something that we know is a rather straightforward way for us to reduce cases and keep our economies open.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Recapping stocks higher, S&P up 21, now a gain of 0.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Let's get right to Dr. Ian Lustbader, still with us, Clinical Associate Professor of Medicine at NYU Langone Medical Center, on the phone from New York City. So I do want to ask you, Ian, so goes Europe, so go the United States. And I ask that because I've been talking with some folks over in Asia, and they're like, if you want clues of kind of maybe what happens next for you in the U.S., just look at what's going on in Asia. But we know it's not apples to apples, whether it's Asia in the U.S. or Europe in the U.S. So when we see those rising numbers in Europe, what should we take from that potentially as U.S. citizens? Or nothing, maybe?
I agree with you. I think globally we're certainly seeing another wave, and in South America and certainly in Europe, France almost declaring a state of emergency, or things borderline. And both due to the seasonal factors, as the weather gets cooler, there's less outdoor distancing, there's more indoor meeting. And so it's not uncommon. We saw this in 1918 with various waves of the H1N1 Spanish flu.
Well, I did not see that at 1918, and I know you did not, and I know Paul did not.
Collective memory. Right. So and without a vaccine and without effective treatment, it's not totally shocking to see that. It is a little hard to explain country by country variations. Now, part of that is habits and mask wearing and social distancing. Part of it may also relate to underlying health. In other words, there are some countries that are thinner, healthier, and we do know that diabetes, high blood pressure, elevated weight, and unfortunately in the United States, we have an epidemic of obesity, we have an epidemic of type 2 diabetes, we have an epidemic of a lot of those health issues, and that makes us more vulnerable to the virus. So when people who are not in optimal health get exposed to the virus, higher complication rates, higher hospitalizations, and higher death rates. So individually, we need to take care of ourselves and do smart things like mask wearing. I certainly agree. I think we have a good consensus. Alone, that's probably not enough, and certainly people need to get their diseases under control, better diet, lose weight, exercise more regularly.
Should we make sure we get like the normal flu shot, things like that, just to make sure we're not kind of, more vulnerable in terms of health? Yeah.
100%, Carol, as usual. You're on the case. And yeah, absolutely, you want to minimize comorbidities, or the worst thing would be getting flu and COVID. And we think that double virus hit would have a much higher morbidity and mortality. So while we're waiting for approval of monoclonal antibodies, and while we're waiting approval for messenger RNA and other vaccines, we have to be very vigilant, with mask wearing and hand washing, and some people feel, Tony Fauci, vitamin D supplementation. You don't want to take too much, you don't want to take too little. You can find your levels, and of course, diet, exercise, weight loss. We've seen a lot of increase in weight by people staying indoors and eating poorly and gaining weight. So, we have to take individual control while we're waiting for some technologic breakthroughs, which I think are coming. I mean, they're here in a few months.
All right, doctor, let's go there. Vaccines, we got a lot of companies working on them. Let's say we do, in fact, get some vaccines, late this year, maybe first half of next year. What are your patients telling you about their willingness to take a vaccine?
Yeah.
Another good question. Certainly all the healthcare professionals I speak to, they are ready to take those vaccines. I'm certainly ready to do that because we're exposed every day. The patients really are, some of them are afraid that we've rushed this. Some of them are afraid to take any vaccine, including what we recommend, tetanus, pneumonia, shingles vaccine. So there are some, not anti-vaxxers, but people who are a little afraid to take vaccines. So it may be a challenge to get everybody on board with a COVID vaccine, and if only a small percentage of people take it, it's obviously going to be less effective. So I think if the first wave of people, perhaps healthcare professionals and or elderly people in nursing homes, take it, and they seem to do well, hopefully that will encourage everyone to line up and get on board.
Ian, really quickly, 25 seconds. Are you surprised or comforted by New York schools that it seems to be, for the most part, going fairly well? Just quickly.
Yes, I think there are a lot of reasons to get back. I think if it's done carefully, it should be successful.
All right, good stuff. You are quick. You've done this so much. You're so good. Ian, have a great weekend.
A pleasure. You too. Thanks so much.
Stay well. Dr. Ian Lustbader, Clinical Associate Professor of Medicine at NYU Langone Medical Center, on the phone from New York. I am kind of comforted, Paul, and I know there's a lot of kids still not back at school, and there's a lot of virtual learning going on, but that the numbers have kind of stayed okay.
They have, knock on wood, and I think it's because of the staff and the parents and everybody doing the right thing.
I agree with totally. All right, let's get a check on the latest world and national news. Over to Nancy Lyons. We go once again in our Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in the nation's capital. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Millions of Americans are breaking voter turnout records with 3 weeks to go before the election, and Democrats are casting early ballots at a far higher rate than Republicans. The Elections Project out of the University of Florida says more than 21 million voters have cast their ballot early, either in person or by mail, in states that report voting data. That's about 15% of the votes that were counted in the entire last presidential election. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie says he regrets not wearing a mask at a White House event before contracting coronavirus. He talked about it on ABC's Good Morning America.
It was a mistake. I was led to believe that, all the people that I was interacting with at the White House had been tested, and it gave you a false sense of security. And it was a mistake. But I let my guard down, and it cost me in a significant way.
Christie says he spent a week in the ICU before fully recovering. Pfizer's CEO says their vaccine will not be ready by the election. He says the company cannot seek emergency authorization of its vaccine before the third week of November. And that's if everything goes well. Albert Bourla made clear that the issue isn't just whether the vaccine prevents the virus's infection. For safety, he says at least half the participants in the 44,000-person study today must be tracked for 2 months after their last dose. Well, the U.S. will soon surpass 8 million known coronavirus cases. The numbers jump by 1 million in less than a month as dozens of states are seeing upticks in infections, particularly in the Midwest. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser along with Paul Sweeney. This story definitely had a read spike. It's our most read story in the past hour on the Bloomberg, and it's about Goldman Sachs warning of more job losses, Paul. And they're talking about jumbo mergers. We've seen a lot of M&A activity this year.
I clicked on this story thinking it was a story about Goldman Sachs itself shedding jobs, and I think that is the reason it's the most read story. Right. But it's about John Waldron, who is the president of Goldman Sachs. He was speaking at a conference today, Carol, and he was saying, listen, when we get to the other side of this, there's going to be some big M&A, some of stronger companies buying weaker companies, and what happens there? You cut jobs to cut costs to service the debt and drive returns. I think that's generally what he was talking about, and that is on top of already a very difficult jobs market, obviously pandemic related, that we're feeling. So just kind of talking about M&A, good for the investment bankers, perhaps not so good for workers.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, we're already in an economy that is struggling. And so if you start to see these mega mergers, what does that mean for more people? Consolidation, right? You often see more people losing jobs as a result of that, and you do wonder what that will do to any kind of economic recovery. It's interesting. He said specifically, our clients are more desirous of playing offense and doing deals. That's a good thing. But that includes large companies looking to consolidate smaller companies, and that will be complicated societally.
Yeah, and it's always a tough thing politically for the acquiring company to lay off people, cut jobs. It's going to be even more so. They're going to have to be very careful how they do that. You can't, I'd be surprised if they're going to have to be, again, just very careful about how they do that because this is going to be an economy that's really reeling from job losses, and people are going to be sensitive to it, as will politicians and regulators.
Yeah, absolutely. But it certainly has been a market environment that is welcoming to a lot of consolidation. We've certainly seen that play out when you see some of the share reactions,
Yeah, and I think we're, as what we hear from some deal makers is, again, once CEOs and boards get a little bit more comfort, a little bit more certainty, they're going to be out there.
All right, this is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. It is an up Friday here, on track for a winning week for the U.S. stock market. S&P rebounding from a three-day slide. Measures of retail sales and consumer sentiment topped estimates. Stocks higher now with the S&P up 19. That's a gain of 0.6%. The Dow up 249, up 0.9. NASDAQ up 44, up 0.4. The 10-year down 1/32, 10-year yield 0.73%. Gold down 0.3%, 19.02 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.4%, $40.81 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is indeed. All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So, Paul, kind of amazing that we're just 17 days to go.
I was going to ask you, because you're always good with how many days left. 17 days.
I've got a clock up on my computer. I'm serious.
Well, good for you. That's what we need. I mean, and last night was just compelling, the dueling town halls, different networks, just crazy.
Yeah, and it's actually 17 days, 10 hours, 11 minutes, and 29 seconds. That's how much, it's like the debt clock that we used to see, and I think it's still in New York City. All right, let's get to it with Bloomberg News White House correspondent Josh Wingrove. He's on the phone, and we were talking about your story on the Bloomberg, the most read on the past, I think, 8 hours, Josh, about...
Oh, that's good news.
Yeah. Well done.
Hope your editors are listening.
But it talks about the president and how he's undercutting the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the you take the good and the bad if you work for Donald Trump, So yeah, all these polls are showing him trailing. It's narrower in the swing states, but pretty much not a lot of signs of hope. And seniors and suburban women are two groups that really stick out. Trump won seniors in 2016, crucial, particularly for states like, Florida, Arizona, that kind of thing. And now he's losing to Biden by about the same margin, a huge swing among the senior vote. They're targeting ads at seniors, and as I speak, President Trump is giving an address in Florida aimed at seniors in particular. But with that and with women, he tends to sort of counteract the message that his campaign is giving. In other words, he makes fun of Biden for, belonging in a nursing home while at the same time trying to convince seniors to vote for him. And with women, he sort of has put these pleas, he literally said this week, suburban women, will you please like me? As these gender gaps just get wider with Biden. So, the Trump campaign, they're trying to catch up. If you believe these polls are anything close to the sort of 10-point, 9-point, 12-point gap range, then you acknowledge they've got some catching up to do, and they're trying to do this, but they kind of got to work with what the president's willing to give them.
Yeah, Josh, it seems, his campaign strategy seems to be these Make America Great rallies, but as I look at these rallies on TV, everybody's got the hat on. It seems like there's not too many undecideds that are being impacted by his strategy here in these last 17 days. It seems like it's just kind of playing to his base, and he's already got those folks.
There is a preaching to the choir risk, for sure, and I think it's a little unclear into how big that is. The campaign says they get a lot of data from this stuff, right? Like, folks sign up for tickets, they get their cell phone number. A lot of these folks didn't vote in 2016. Some of them are independents, some of them are Democrats. So the campaign says, look, these rallies, A, Trump likes them, and having Donald Trump in good mood is crucial if you work for the Trump campaign. But B, it's about voter identification to a certain extent. So that's how they're doing it. But look, like Donald Trump's own approval rating is pretty locked in as well, but they're not really backing off on him. In fact, he's coming out every day, it seems, with a rally or two rallies. He'll be in Georgia later tonight. Every day, it's just like more Trump all the time. So, if they're going to turn this around, they're banking that it's Donald Trump himself who will be able to do it. And, there's not a lot of evidence in the polls that kind of path will work, and there are early signs that turnout is going to spike. I think that was concerning to the Trump camp. If turnout really soars, that I don't think will be good news for Republicans.
I mean, we've been all talking all day on Bloomberg that I think one of the stories I read, and yours too. I think more than 21 million Americans already participating in early voting. I mean, that's a pretty big number. Two quick questions: Can either candidate win without Florida?
Trump, technically yes, but basically Trump needs Florida a lot more than Biden does. Biden doesn't really need Florida at all. It'd be nice to have, but if Biden is winning Florida, we're probably looking at a blowout. Whereas Trump needs Florida and then some. So it's a very competitive state, but it really, they've just announced that, for instance, Barack Obama is going to campaign in Pennsylvania. That looks to be the real sort of tipping point state. Biden is leading in Michigan, leading in Wisconsin. If he wins those and takes Pennsylvania, that'll probably do it. But there's other paths to get there as well. And we'll see, for instance, the president's going to go to Michigan and Wisconsin this weekend, Arizona and Nevada as well.
Yeah. And what about when it comes to early polling? Does that usually go more in favor? I know we talked about this with Josh Green, more in favor of Democrats versus Republicans, or is there something different this time around? We've seen the lines.
Yeah. I mean, two things. So, I wrote about this morning how the notion of losing to Biden looks to irk Trump, right? It bothers him that he could lose to Joe Biden. And that's starting to work its way into his speeches these last few days. The other thing that's worked its way in is he started talking about a red wave. He thinks that, come voting day, Republicans are going to show up in such numbers that they're going to really swamp the high numbers in advance turnout. And that speaks to the reality, which is that Democrats are far likelier to vote in advance, either in-person advance or by mail, than Republicans are. And Republicans, conversely, are far more likely to vote on the day of and show up in person. And so, this is important to bear in mind as we prepare for the night of November 3rd and the morning of November 4th and maybe the night of November 4th, because this could take a while. Every state treats advance votes a little differently. Some are allowed to count them in advance, some are not. We are seeing blowout numbers in advance voter turnout in a lot of states right now. Of course, the pandemic is playing a role in that.
Hey, Josh, what do we know about the future of any debates between now and Election Day?
We know, they have one more scheduled for next Thursday, 6 nights from now. That'll be the last one. They tried, the Trump campaign wanted to push the debate that was supposed to be last night in its format. The Biden campaign wanted to push it till next week so they could do that. The Trump campaign wanted to push both of them a week. Biden campaign said no. Bit of back and forth on that. That's why you had those dueling events last night. So it really all comes down to next week. Traditionally, it's the people that are trailing campaigns that need debates to catch up, right? The leader gets the luxury of autopilot. Right. And so we'll see what Donald Trump gets on that. Of course, we'll see. I don't know. I'm not looking more than a day in advance at this stage. It seems like things are so fast moving in some ways.
Hey, just got about a minute left here, Josh, or about 45 seconds. Did either one come out ahead or gain something from last night?
I think that Donald Trump's answers on QAnon are going to resonate.
Okay, I'm placing stop on profit for British pound at 129.24.5. Okay. Stop on profit 129.24.5. Okay, that's it. Let's see what's happened next.
Because he needs to catch up.
I feel like I'm watching like some great movie, political movie, fiction, and then I'm like, no, this is our world.
This is our life.
It's our reality, right?
Yes.
Josh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Josh Wingrove, he's Bloomberg News White House correspondent. Definitely check out all of his work on Bloomberg. You can find him at Josh_Wingrove. Just kind of wild stuff, Paul.
Yeah, wild stuff. And again, 17 days to the election. I wonder if we're going to have to start counting down also to the Electoral College, certifying this thing. I see that number out there as well. Hopefully this will be a clear enough decision one way or the other on, on or about election night, and the country can begin to move forward.
It's a civics course we're all going to get.
Yes.
All right, for those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week continues. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is next. But next on Business Week, we've got a real treat, someone who's so well known in the telecom industry.
News. I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Friday, October 16th. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. S&P rebounding from a three-day slide, heading for its longest weekly advance since late August. Stocks climbed after measures of retail sales and consumer sentiment topped estimates. S&P up 24, up 0.7%, bringing its year-to-date gain now to 8.6%. The Dow once again positive on the year, for the year, up by 0.8%. Today surging 282 points, up by 1%. NASDAQ's up 61. That is a gain of 0.5%. 10-year is down 3/32 now with a yield of 0.74%. Gold down 0.3%, 19.03 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.2%. WTI at $40.89 a barrel. Well, as for the economic news, the economic backdrop, and the recovery, Chet Naya is chief economist at Morgan Stanley.
What we have been highlighting is that the equation between virus and the economy is changing. So as we keep seeing this new cases rising again, we have to temper down the expectation of its impact on the economy. We've been of the view that growth will moderate in the next 3 months, but it will still continue to make progress towards that V-shaped recovery call that we had made, which is that we will see that U.S. economy will reach pre-COVID levels by second quarter of 2021.
Volkswagen's heavy truck unit Traton has reached an agreement to acquire the rest of Navistar International for $3.69 billion in a deal supported by billionaire investor Carl Icahn. Adding Navistar, the maker of international branded trucks, to Traton's portfolio will help VW better take on sector leaders Daimler and Volvo. Shares of Navistar surging now by 22.9%. The ADRs of Volkswagen, the American Depository Receipts, up now by 1.7%. Again, recapping equities higher across the board. Friday rally underway, on track for a winning week with the S&P up 23 points, up 0.7. NASDAQ is up 0.5. Dow Industrials up by 0.9%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, you know, Carol, when you talk to technology investors, two themes come up, it just seems, time and time again. One is the cloud. Everything's going to the cloud, and that's going to drive spending for the next gajillion years. And the second one is 5G, how this is the future of wireless. Even Apple, it got into the act this week, launching its iPhone 12 with its 5G capabilities. Let's get a sense of what this really means, and there's nobody better than Craig Moffett, founding partner and senior analyst at MoffettNathanson. And if you want to know anything that's going on in the TMT space, you have to get the research from MoffettNathanson. He joins us on the phone from New York. Craig, thanks so much for joining us here. What did you make of Apple, the iPhone 12, and just kind of 5G in general?
First of all, thank you for having me back on, Paul. It's good to talk to you again. I would say this. I would say that, if anything, the Apple 5G event sort of has been a little bit of an uncomfortable reminder for everybody that 5G is not really fully baked yet. And the announcement has sort of forced everybody to come to grips with the idea that that right now 5G is still very much a year.
And the close position on British pound at 129.245. We're in profit.
And I hope you're doing well. I do wonder, my husband was up at 8 a.m. or before that, because he wanted to order his new Apple iPhone. I swear to God. And he stayed up till 3 in the morning, because when they open it all up, and he's going to order my new phone when it comes out, I think in a week or two. And so are we crazy? We've been kind of waiting for this. Are we crazy because 5G isn't completely built out here?
Well, if 5G is the reason that you're getting a new phone, then yes, that's crazy. It's just not ready yet.
Thank you very much.
There are other reasons to get new phones, and if you like the new camera and that sort of thing. And look, handset cycles have been lengthening for a long time, so there are an awful lot of old phones out there that need replacement anyway. But 5G as a rationale, it just isn't very compelling. I mean, here's the problem. And sorry if this is a little bit technical, but
we love technical.
If you deploy 5G on on low frequency spectrum to get the coverage of the country, it's no faster than 4G. If you deploy it in very high frequency spectrum and big spectrum blocks, it's very, very fast. They demoed